Excellent. Okay, well, welcome everybody. So today's session is all about how to do marketing if you don't like social media. Um, it's an interesting topic because there's a lot of noise, especially at this time of year, around how you do marketing, and you must love social media in order for it to work. It's all that kind of messaging about I've got 1 million followers. So if you want to be anywhere near successful, you have to be on social media doing blah, blah, blah. And there's a lot of noise and quite a lot of nonsense in my mind around this necessity for social media. But I do believe that there is a way of not needing to use social media as your primary marketing output. I think there is a way to engage with people, to grab people's attention, to welcome them into the conversation without necessarily needing to use social media. So what I thought I'd do is share a couple of bits and pieces, thoughts, if you will, around sort of some of the limitations with social media that are in place of marketing. Then what I thought I would do is open up to any questions people might have about specific social media channels. And then I thought we'd work through in the sort of later half of the session, some things and places we can show up, some things we can do that are not social media led, and then maybe we can share those with the group so we can kind of collectively understand a bit more about where people are hanging out when they're not staring at their phones. So there we go. So let me share a couple of thoughts just to get us warmed up, and then we'll do some questions. So essentially, the biggest problem I see with social media from a marketing perspective, from a what it's doing to society, etc., perspective, we'll probably leave that on the back burner for today. But from a marketing perspective, the biggest issue I have with social media is that you don't own, in brackets, the followers, the likes, the engagement. You are essentially renting them, and the cost you pay is that you give the platform stuff to share, i.e. posts, videos, you interact, you spend, your eyeballs are on the app, which means you see adverts. So if, like someone I know recently, their Instagram just gets closed down because just that's closed down, haven't got that anymore, thanks for coming, next. There's no support, there's no phone number, no shits are given. It is literally you are on your own. So your Instagram can disappear at any time. It is not yours. You don't own it. You have no rights in it. All of the content that is uploaded, you are licensing to Instagram to use. It is not yours. So that's the first big problem in Instagram is you're building their business, not your business. Now, that isn't to say that there isn't any value in it and there isn't any worth in doing that. But I think just from a time and effort perspective, it's worth bearing in mind. So we've got Instagram, we've got TikTok, we've got LinkedIn. Some people are probably still on Facebook. We've got Reddit. That still counts technically as a social channel, although more loosely. YouTube, another good one. There's lots of other smaller level social networks as well, but those are the big hitters. And I think really when we're looking at what we're doing with social media, it isn't really a case of, well, this social media network is really popular right now. This is where all of the people are doing the things right now. That's ultimately fairly irrelevant as coaches because you don't want to talk to everybody. Let's say you go on TikTok, you get 20 million views and you had 4,000 people fill in your contact form next week. The hell would you do with that? Nothing. It's completely useless. It's of no interest. So becoming an influencer, becoming a kind of social media megastar is just not part of becoming a coach. So I think what we need to focus on really, and this is the essence of this whole session, is where are your clients hanging out? Where are they spending time? And crucially, where are they going to ask questions? And that you could reframe that statement as where do they go looking for answers, i.e. where do they find those answers? So if your questions start with how to or how do I, the most likely place they're going to end up is YouTube if they go in via Google, because that is just seems to be where everybody ends up. How do you do this? So, for example, it's not a coincidence that I called this session, How do I do marketing if you don't like social media? Because that is literally what someone will type into Google to find the answer. And the idea was that they then find the recording and it's all made because I'm designing this session to A, attract people who are thinking that thing, and B, to attract people who are asking that question. So what I'm sort of getting at here is that social media in itself isn't necessarily a bad thing. It is a game that sometimes is worth playing, especially if that's where your people are hanging out. So, for example, I've gone fairly heavily in on both YouTube and LinkedIn because I find that's where people engage with my content. The kind of content I make is engaged with on those platforms. So I play the LinkedIn game, that's a game worth playing. But I'm fully aware that I don't own the people on LinkedIn. I could go through and message all of them individually, but realistically, that's not going to, with a couple of thousand followers, that's not really practical, is it? So that is my sort of poo-pooing of social media. But I think there is a positive side to it in the sense that there are a lot of people spending a lot of time on it, to all the different networks. So therefore, if your clients are on there spending their time and attention and energy on that platform, then sometimes it is a game that you're going to need to play. But it doesn't necessarily mean you have to go all in on that platform. There are other ways of engaging with your audience. So, for example, one of the best ones is to either have an email list that you can send content to those people who have opted in, because that's a really great way of saying to people, I'm going to be sending out this kind of content. If you'd like that kind of content to be in your inbox, that can happen by simply giving me the email. You own that list. It's a really great way of kind of curating a list of people who've said, I'm interested, please tell me more. And it's fairly simple and cost effective to get set up. It's not a big cost until you get into the thousands and thousands of people. And ultimately, as we've already established, having thousands and thousands and thousands of people on a list isn't necessarily what you want anyway. So a small manageable list is definitely one of those things. I think probably for the sake of argument, I'm going to assume here that podcasting, in my mind, isn't a social network. Because unlike YouTube, where there is below the line, the comments section, there just isn't on podcasts. So it is one-way traffic until you invite your audience to put their hand up and say, I'd like to know more from you. So for my money, podcasting rises to the top and is not in the world of social media. That falls into the same camp for me as email marketing. Although you can't reach your listeners' inboxes, you can reach their ears and their attention in a way that you can't do with any other social media platform. So there's that area to discuss as well. I'm happy to kind of discuss more around podcasting email lists, because I think those are the two things that we can kind of delve into a bit more in this session. So first of all, what I'd like to do is, based on what I've shared already, has anybody got any questions or thoughts or comments, or does anybody strongly disagree so far? Mark's put in the chat that the problem podcasting has is it's the same kind of discovery problem as blogging or newsletter writing. So you end up having to figure out how to market the podcast. Yes, exactly that, Mark. So I would completely agree with that. So one of the big things with a mailing list is it's very easy for your mailing list to be the internet's best kept secret, which of course is completely useless. So you still have to get out there and find these people who want to say yes, but that is the point of marketing, isn't it? So yeah, if you don't, but I think it comes down to this thing of there's no point just opening an Instagram account and starting posting on Instagram, really, at all, unless you know that the kind of people you want to work with are hanging out on Instagram, in which case it probably is. But crucially, the kind of people you want to work with who are not wearing their work hat, or they're not wearing their, do you know what I mean? Like, so if you're going after probably self-employed people are a bit different because they're kind of always wearing the work hat. But if you're going after someone who's very much employed, then on social media isn't necessarily the best place to talk to them about work, because they're trying not to be at work. That's why they've opened their phones and they're not at work. It can work, but it's more of an advertising-y campaign type thing. And there is, you know, a lot of people out there who make content about things to do in Excel and other work-related content. I'm not saying it doesn't work, but I'm just saying from the point of view of your coaching practice, it's about understanding, are the kind of people who you want to work with on that social media platform and wanting to hear or even think about the stuff you're talking about. And if the answer is no, then you can save your time and your money and just not bother with it. So, like, for example, I don't put much on my book Instagram because I'm just like, it's just another channel. And I find I get far better traction putting my videos on YouTube and putting my videos on LinkedIn. So I've gone, you know, it's that whole thing of, if you're going to go fishing, go where the fish are. So has anybody got any other questions or thoughts? What have we got here? Peter has said, also, if you work, you may not want to talk about it on social media in case work reads it. In very true, very true. So sometimes you might not want to follow a career change coach on Instagram, because if your boss knows about your Instagram and they see you've started following a career change coach, they might be asking you some questions. Very good, as one example, but of course there are many other examples of that. So I think it's really about understanding where people are, what are they doing. So I find I meet a lot of coaches at networking. A lot of coaches go networking, and I do a lot of networking in Brighton, mainly because I'm lucky enough to be in a city that has some really good networking. It's not just rooms of dusty accountants and solicitors who are very keen to give you a very long form to fill in. There's some really interesting businesses and some good people out there doing interesting stuff. So networking is I can't emphasize enough how good networking is for going to meet other businesses. It's really good fun. It doesn't have to be infinite sales pitches. There are some organizations out there that make you do a pitch and make you bring leads and make you get up at silly o'clock in the morning and drive to a golf course you've never heard of. But it doesn't have to be that way. There are other networking events around you. And what I would say is, if you can't find a good networking event around you, then it means no one's doing one. So you could probably be the person who starts it. I've seen that work very well for certain people, especially in Brighton. There's already a lot of networking in Brighton, but yet there's probably 2 or 3 a year start that are more industry specific. So yeah, don't be afraid to be the person who gathers the people together. If you can't find it, maybe that's the time. So if you're looking for a meetup for accountants and finance professionals and there isn't one, and you live near a large city, you know, obviously there's got to be enough people, or a town, and you think there's got to be some other people who'd like to come here and talk about this, then stick it on Eventbrite. Find a room in a pub or do a cafe in the middle of the day. If you don't think people will come after work, just see who turns up. So my friend Adam Bastock, who started Small 99, some of you may know him, he did exactly that in lockdown. And just after lockdown, he just said, do you know what, we're just going to get together and we're going to, in a room, some people who want to talk about getting their small business to net zero, see who turns up. First event, he had about 20 people. The next event, 30. That bit, he now has 14,000 people a month meeting in venues all across Europe to just talk about moving their small business towards a less carbon intense output. Not to use the word, he's trying not to use the word net zero at the moment, so I'm taking that on board. But my point being, he went from about 20 people to 14,000 people across Europe by simply giving it no agenda. There's no sales pitch. There's no, just turn up and talk about stuff. So it's a very long-winded way of saying, I think out there, if you can't find the place to meet the people, then it might be worth trying to start a thing, because there's probably people thinking the same thing as you. It's just no one started it. And it's a great way to collect together people and get to know people and network and get referrals. I meet a lot of coaches and consultants when I'm out networking. It's a very good way for me to promote my book and my one-to-one work. I get a lot of clients that way by simply showing up and being in the place where they're hanging out. It's not that, yeah, there's nothing too complicated about it. I don't have business cards. I don't do a little sales pitch. I just say, you can find me on LinkedIn. Get my phone out, open up LinkedIn. Don't know if anybody knows this. When you're on LinkedIn, or you can be the coolest person at networking. Which is not hard to do. You open up your LinkedIn app. There it is. You tap in the search bar at the top, and then you tap the little QR code symbol in the corner, and you get this QR code. People scan your QR code, and you're connected. Simple as that. Who needs a business card? What have you done there? You've connected together. They're going to see your content when you post on LinkedIn. I know this is a whole thing about not using social media, and I've just told you how to connect on social media, but it's actually a really good way of connecting that doesn't involve the kind of traditional networking thing. The other thing I do is I have a page on my website, which is just an email sign-up form. So if someone is really interested in my content or what I'm talking about, I say, look, I can send you some emails once a week if you'd like to. If you want to sign up, that's all good. I don't drop this into every conversation, only in very specific circumstances when it feels natural. And on my phone, I just have the sign up form. And it's just name, email. They pop their details in, hit go, and they're subscribed. I get quite a lot of people added to the mailing list in that way. Because you've got the trust, you've got that face-to-face thing. Yeah. So in terms of promotion, that is a slow and steady way to do it face to face. Obviously, there is a time, transport, and audience, shall we say, level to that sort of networking approach. The other thing that is useful to do, or is an effective strategy, I find, is essentially to have shareable content. So by that, I don't necessarily mean shareable as in shareable on social. So if you're making your content so it is TikTok friendly, then it's not going to go down so well in an email newsletter because it's not that format. Do you see what I mean? So if you are making content to share with your audience, then it, surprise, surprise, becomes much easier to share with your audience. So for example, let's just have a look at a recent blog. So I've written a recent blog I've got is Will AI Take My Job? That's the name of the blog. So if I'm talking to someone at a networking event and they're talking about how they're a bit worried about AI taking over their industry, I say, do you know what? I've actually written a blog on that. Shall I send it to you and you can have a read? And they're often like, oh yeah, go on then. Yeah, I'd like to hear what you got to say about that. Get their email address or connect on LinkedIn, whichever. Up to you. Get their email address, and afterwards I follow up from networking and send them that blog. It's a really good way of being able to have content that is about the kind of ideas that your customers, your ideal clients, sorry, are thinking about, are talking about. Some of the thoughts, the feelings, the actions that they're currently living with. If you've got content all about that, then when they start talking to you about that, which they inevitably will, you've got great content that's not salesy. It's just ideas. It's you explaining a concept. It's you doing a walkthrough. It's you explaining a concept in a video, perhaps. And you can then share that with those people. You can do it on Zoom as well. I do it all the time in these chats. I will, you know what? Here is the blog on why AI will take your, will AI take my jobs? You can have a look at it. There we go. I'm going to do that. I'm going to pop it into the chat now. And if you're watching on repeat, it will be underneath the video. There it is. It's not a long blog. It's not the shortest blog I've ever written, but it's not far from the longest blog I've ever written. And I got AI to generate the image, which was quite fun, which is I talk about in the blog. And yeah, it's just one of those, it's a little bit of content. It's super easy to share. There's no sales pitch. I mentioned that you can dive deeper with the book at the end. On my website, you can sign up to get more emails. So I'm saying if you want more of this, this is how you get it. If you don't, you can go. But the idea with this kind of content is it's easy to share, it's easy to refer. So for example, if I send this to someone at networking, then they're speaking to someone in their office or one of their clients says, no, I'm a bit worried actually that I'm going to be out of a job soon because this AI. So what, I read a blog about that the other day. Let me forward it to you because there's no sales pitch at the end. This isn't like a blog all about my 6-part program. This isn't a high pressure sales page with a countdown timer and a 99.99 offer that only lasts 9 hours and 9 minutes. You know, there's none of that bullshit on this page. This is just an idea that I had while I was walking to the office one day and thought I should write a blog about that. I did, and there it is. So this is the kind of content that is really good for promoting your email list and promoting your podcast. So if you are doing podcast style that is the sort of read aloud, so it's you essentially reading these blogs out loud, as part of your content or riffing around them. Don't have to be scripted. You could just be you using what you've written as an inspiration, as a talking point. You record that as a podcast. Embedding that podcast episode in this blog is a really good idea, because then if you do recommend it, people are like, oh, there's a podcast as well. Actually, maybe I should do that. I'm gonna hit subscribe. And there are ways of embedding it where you can have the buttons underneath it as well, so you can make that even easier. You might be thinking, that's a really good idea, Simon. Why haven't you done it? Yeah, it's a really good idea, isn't it? Essentially, I've been procrastinating. That's my thing on my podcast. It's coming really soon. I recorded the intro. I've been putting this off for so long because I've got a fun idea for an intro, like a teaser trailer, and I've been putting it off for ages, and I've been using that to not get around to doing it. So I'm going to take my own medicine, eat my own dog food. What's that thing, take my own advice. And yeah, I'm going to be sound designing that a bit later on this afternoon. So it is coming, but there you go. Yes. So sorry, I've gone off on a right self-promotion indulgent tangent there. So I think, does anybody have any thoughts or ideas around that so far?
I was going to ask you, Simon, you talked about kind of needing to play in LinkedIn and those spaces, but not being all in. And I'd just be interested in your thoughts on what enough is. What is, when you say not all in, how in do you need to be?
Oh, that's a great question. So we could just go for the kind of tactical marketing response, which is it depends. But I think there is a more scientific answer than that. For me, it's once a week.
Right.
And that is enough for me. I find I've tried doing twice a week. And it didn't move the dial. I pulled that lever, doubled the work, and for me, didn't make any difference.
Right.
I tried posting every day, and it just knackered me out, made me stressed, and I just was posting, to be honest, tosh, because I just couldn't think of anything to post. So I've gone back to impulsive posting, but with a commitment to show up once a week. I think if you do every 2 weeks, like if you're not doing coaching full time, if it's one of the things you do, I think every other week would be okay. Monthly, I think, is pushing it. I think at monthly, you're becoming quite forgettable. It's am I still subscribed to that once a month? Every other week feels okay. Whereas I find, because I do this all the time, weekly for me feels right. You all know now, I suffer from procrastination. So if I don't have a deadline, I will not do it. So what I did is I did the ultimate, went on LinkedIn and said, I'm going to be sending an email Monday morning. every Monday. If you want it, this is where you sign up. And I said to myself, if 10 people sign up for this, you're sending it next Monday. And 15 people signed up. So I was like, well, now I've got to do it because I told them I'm sending it to them on Monday. And when you join the emailing list, the email says, see you next Monday. So I thought, well, I'm committed. And that to me works well. So I do a simultaneous drop, as it were. So I do email, LinkedIn, YouTube, Medium. It goes out on BBB. It goes to, that's it. That's where it goes. But it all goes out 8 a.m. Monday morning, and I just schedule it all. And I try and get it done by the end of the week. And then it means at the weekend I can just power down. And that is when I have my ideas about what I'm going to write about next.
And is Monday a strategically good day?
I chose it for purely alliteration reasons because it's Monday marketing motivation.
Oh, okay.
So it has to be Monday because it doesn't work on any other day of the week. It's probably a really bad day to send it out. It's probably a bad time. Maybe I should switch it to Monday afternoon. The thing is with LinkedIn, it doesn't matter when you post it, whatever time of day, because it's not time specific. It's network effect specific. So if I open the app at 3 p.m. this afternoon, I still see content that was posted at 8 a.m. It's not linear feed doesn't exist anymore. From an inbox point of view, maybe I'll try it. But the problem is I've kind of committed to the 8 thing, to the morning thing now. My thought of it is if I can be the email that pops up on the bus or the train or the while you're making a coffee, and the first link is to a YouTube video, my kind of thing is like it's a gentle start into the week that's going to give you a different starts of the week. That's my hope. That's the kind of framing I've got around it. But whether that is true, I don't know. I could look into the reports section of the email software I use and see when people actually click the link as opposed to when I think they click the link. But I don't. My list isn't big enough for that data to be meaningful. I'm going to give a quick shout out here to MailerLite because I was with the dark overlords of MailChimp for a long time. Many moons. And Mark Steadman, as featured on the call, said, you want to get away from that because MailerLite's great. And I was like, really? There's a lot of them out there and they all look very similar. And I had tried Drip and I use Drip for marketing automation and we use it for BBB. I also have another e-commerce client and we can do all sorts of crazy madness in terms of workflows and ooh, it's really good. So I tried MailerLite and yeah, within an hour I had cancelled my MailChimp and moved my whole mailing list over and sat there building a template. It's just like I'm in. So if you're looking for something simple that sends great looking emails, then I can't recommend MailerLite enough. It's lovely. It's free to use for up to like a few hundred people. And you get some really good, I'm amazed at how many good features you get for Nout. And then if you want to use some of the more in-depth features, then you have to stump it up. But it's what, €9 a month or something? It's not big money. It's a quarter of MailChimp is how I would describe it. So yeah, I would use that. They also make, if you are not website inclined, they make a little form that you can add to your website or you can send to your web developer to add so that people can sign up. But they also make a nice, exceedingly simple little sign up form website that has a domain name. He's literally just name and email. There's a little form for people to sign up with. So that's great for networking. Remember I said earlier, you can just say, if you want to sign up, here it is. No web skills needed. It makes you a web form that collects the data. So you could bookmark that on your phone. You could save it in a note. You could add it as a link to your email footer. There's lots of different things you could do that don't involve any web skills there. You can start building that list. Yeah, so that's a good one. That's a really good, fun thing to do. Friends of the community will know Chris Kenworthy. If you've not spent time with Chris Kenworthy, I highly recommend following him on either Instagram or his podcast is really good as well. So do check out Chris Kenworthy. But why did I bring up Chris? Because Chris had a really good, fun email he was going to send out. and he wanted to send it out to all his clients, but he's a bit like, is it right to just bombard clients with a newsletter? So he basically sent everybody an email telling them to unsubscribe. If you know Chris, you'll understand this vibe. But he basically said, I'm going to be sending you a newsletter unless you unsubscribe. So this is your chance to not hear from me again. And I think he hadn't, it's either one or two or none unsubscribed, because everyone was like, I'm up for this. He was really open about what it was going to be, what the content was going to include. And yeah, he managed to turn his entire client list into a really fun, engaging newsletter. I still get it, and it's a great newsletter. So I would highly recommend, if you are going to, you can email people you have legitimately had business engagement with in the past. But my first email I would send them would be, this is what's going to happen. This is the kind of content you're going to be able to enjoy. If you don't want it, no hard feelings. It's just an email. Click the button and you're off the list. Give people that option. Obviously, that will vary audience to audience. There could be some issues with that if you are going after solicitors and or anybody at the ICO. But other than that, you'll probably be all right. Yes, anybody else got any other questions?
Simon, can I just ask?
Yes, Peter.
At the bottom of your blog where you've got your sign up, is that a MailerLite addition to your page?
Well, that is actually a form that I made.
Right.
It could be a MailerLite form. They do have one. But because I have basically it isn't, because it's just quicker and easier for me to do it myself. But I'm aware that it's not true for everybody, because I build websites with the agency. I'm kind of fairly au fait with forms and things like that. So basically I had the form already. I'd already done all the styling. I just had to change one thing in the back end and it hooked up to MailerLite. So for me, it was quicker to do that. If you are new to the website and you scroll halfway down, you might see a pop-up form on my website. That form is MailerLite.
Okay.
If you're already subscribed, you might not, because it knows not to bug you. If you've seen it, it won't bug you again. So you may have already seen it.
Yeah.
Some of them may have signed up via it.
I've signed up, but I was just wondering how to. I've got a contact form on the website, but presumably it's just a type of a contact form, isn't it? But,
exactly. So you can add it to your contact form, but it has to be opt-in.
Yes.
So you can add a button that says, I'd like to hear from Peter about these exciting things. Don't say, do you want to be on my newsletter? Really give it the sell of, you know. So mine is, it's Monday Marketing Motivation. If you want that in your inbox, this is how you get it.
Yeah.
If you sell it as something interesting and fun, that's a tick box to opt in. So for example, if you order the book from me, you can opt in to marketing. And that sentence there actually so far is at 100% opt-in rate. Everybody who buys the book signs up.
Yeah.
So there's quite a good, you know, if someone's spending the time to fill in a form, probably going to want to keep hearing from you. So that's a good opt-in to add. If you speak to your web developer about that, they would be able to add that to your site. Or if you're using something like Gravity Forms, you can do it. It depends how technical everybody wants to get with it, but you can definitely collect that. If you're using Squarespace, you can obviously collect it there. If you're using create.net, if anybody's using that, that's already set up for you. That's already part of their contact form.
Yeah. I've got a contact form for general contacts, but I haven't got one to sign in, so I need to
just add a tick box to that form that says I'd like to hear more, and then as they submit the form, you can use something called Zapier to add that on. It depends how many contact forms you get. Actually, if you only get a handful every now and then, you can just add them manually if they tick the box. I've got a couple of clients who do that because it's just quicker than getting their web developer to charge them a few £100 to add a thing in. It's like, actually, if you only get like a handful a month, you can just copy the email and just add them in yourself. It doesn't just set a, you know, that's all good. So let's think about content then. Let's start to think about, so let's assume that we're gonna I think separate the. Let's go with the. I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll treat ourselves to a backwards journey of confidence. There we go. Consciousness, not confidence. That's slip of the tongue. Let's spotlight for everyone. Whee, there we go. So we start with unaware on a massive box, unlike the small box that we're all used to. It's massive this time. Why is it massive? Because this is the effort it takes you to do the marketing. So the unaware people are the people who are going about their daily lives with a thought, an action, a feeling, something in their lived experience that they don't necessarily realize is something they might like to change. And that is most of the people most of the time. That's where we mostly are. At some point, they become problem aware. So again, the reason we use problem isn't because we're judging them for what they are experiencing. It's simply that it's meant to illustrate the tension that they feel as they become aware that there's something in their lives that they might like to change. So we could call it change aware, to be honest. That would also be a good word for it. But so far, we're sticking with problem. That's what it is. So they become aware. Now, you'll notice that we've dropped down a bit here. And that is because as soon as someone becomes aware of something, it's actually a lot less effort from your point of view because they are naturally curious to find out more. So the amount of effort you need to put into grabbing their attention drops one. So those who are curious and think, that is something I'm experiencing, actually, I'd like to do something about that, will want to find out more. Is there something I can do about this change? The tension has been built from here to here. And they're thinking, oh, I really want to do something about that. Is there a way to do that? I wonder if there's a solution. There it is. They go looking for a solution. So this is where you explain the steps that are needed, or the steps they might like to take in order to move from where they are now to where they want to be. That is often referred to as your method. So that is the way in which your coaching unfolds for them. For some people, it's linear. For other people, it's a cycle. For other people, it's a pattern. You know, there's columns, buckets, bubbles, whatever you want to call it. You will have a way of describing your method. There's a whole tools and techniques on how to do that. So dive deeper into that if you want to. The next thing they do is they go looking for someone to help them with that. So if they think, do you know what, this process that I've just learned about is something I'd actually like to do. I wonder if there's someone who can help me with that. They go looking for a product. So that could be a book, a course, a group coaching, a one-to-one coaching. There's lots of different things product can be. And if then they're like, yeah, this is the thing I want to buy. This is it. What's the first step? They then become most aware. So most aware, all they want to know is, when do we get started? What's the first step? How can I begin this journey that I've learned about? So where does social media fit into this? Social media is over here in unaware. However, most people I see on social media are over here shouting at traffic about their product. Buy my 5-course anti-smoking, get your life sorted program, please. It's $5.99.99. It's all this sort of nonsense. It's just pressure sales, it's funnels, it's sales pages, it's countdown timers. The reason people don't want to buy what you're selling at this point is because nobody knows who you are and no one gives a shit about the change you're trying to ask them to make. What we need to do is dial it back over here. And this is where social media is traditionally very good. So in this workshop, what we're going to do is look at some other things we can do. But for now, bear with me on the social media front. What we need to do is bring to the attention of those who are unaware that there's something they might like to do something about. And then the rest of this marketing is obviously what the whole coach's marketing journey is about. So I'm not going to go too much into the detail of that. We've got other resources for you to work through that. But essentially, it's getting people to think differently. So it's perspectives, it's ideas, it's sharing generously, it's guesting on podcasts, it's going networking, it's showing up where people are looking for answers. It's then making content that answers those questions, that says, hey, if you're thinking this and you're feeling this, I've got a bit more detail on that. This is how those two things are connected. I've written a blog on it. I've got a YouTube video for that. I've got a podcast episode all about it. I spoke to so-and-so about this on my podcast. Listen to it here. And then rather than ending the podcast with, buy my 6-part program, it's only $5.99 and jumping straight into products, what we can do is we can send people to the solution. And that is where you simply explain how the process works. So the process could be, I found through working with clients who are in this situation over many, many years, that actually thinking about these 3 things is the 3 things that get them unstuck. It gets them from feeling really confused to feeling really clear. And those 3 things are, And when we speak about the and we work on the people find that. That's the process. So if you're in that place, try thinking about that's it. That's all you need to do for the solution. And then what you do for those people who are keen, you can say, look, if you're not sure how you're going to get through the 3 steps, I've got a course that you could do. And that course starts now. You can buy it now. It's a video course. It might be you can work with me one-to-one. Could be you could buy my book. There is the product. If you want to take that further, then that's the next step. This is how you get started. It's simple to get started. There it is. So that's how that works. So social media is really effective sometimes for reaching the people who are unaware, because they're often floating around on these networks, not really realizing that the things they're thinking, feeling, and doing in their day-to-day are things they might like to change. So there's an opportunity there, but it doesn't have to be on social media. However, if we think about some of the reasons that people don't like being on social media, i.e., I have to talk about myself, I have to try and sell what I'm doing, I have to try and convince people that they need coaching, all 3 of which sound and make people cringe and crawl up into a small ball, what we've just identified is we don't need to do them. All we actually need to do is share some fun ideas. We say, hey, if you're not sleeping, did you know it might be because you're feeling stressed? It might be like, shit, hey, I thought it was because of my pillow. I didn't realize this stress could have got involved here. That sounds interesting. And then you say, well, if you want to know more about that, I've written a whole blog about how stress and sleep are linked. Check it out. That's all you need to do. Don't need to say any more. So, for example, what I post about when I post about on LinkedIn is, here's a question, here's an idea, here's a thought. I've made a video about it. And at the end, I say, look, if you want to know more about it, there's a blog there, or there's a video there. And then sometimes I mention the book, because I'm like, that's the way to get started if people want to dive deeper or they want to get involved. But the idea being that the unaware stage, it doesn't have to be on social media, but if it is on social media, it doesn't necessarily have to feel like it's on social media, if you see what I mean. So that can be a really good way of showing up. So you could take some of the snippets from your podcast, some of the questions you're asking on your podcast, for example, and say, you know, if you've asked this question, I'd ask that question too. And actually, I found out the answer when I spoke to this person about it. Here's the rest of that episode. Or you could then cut that whole bit of the conversation out of the podcast and use it as some content if you wanted to. And then just remind people they can sign up to the podcast afterwards. So this is really good. Breaking it up like this is really effective for stuff like for when you're networking, for example. Because when you're networking, you're not trying to talk about your product. You're not trying to talk about your solution. You're not trying to talk to people in depth about their problems or their opportunities for change. But what you can do is help people join ideas together. Say, that might be linked to that, you know. And sometimes people are like, oh, that's really good. I like that. And I haven't thought about it like that. And then you go, I wrote a blog on it. Would you like me to email it to you? Even better, I can send you an email every week if you want. It's very low risk, low threat conversation, isn't it? It doesn't feel like selling. It doesn't feel like anything too intense. But what it is actually the first step on the journey you've created for the client. John Paul, you've got a question.
Yeah, it just struck me that the kind of the whole search engine optimization thing kind of forces people into thinking about having to explain the what, why, where of their product. And that's what the Google likes. But actually, when we're posting on social media, we should be focusing on the problem that people are having in, like, certainly in the kind of title and the first paragraph, rather than actually just describing what the thing is that you're doing. And it's just interesting, those two things are pushing us in different directions, I think.
Yes, yeah, I'd agree with that. I think there is definitely an element of focusing on the product when you're doing social media, search engine optimization and advertising, because that is what you need to sell. You need to get bums on seats, you need to shift units, you need to get the stuff out the door. So traditionally, marketing is all about the product, but when you're looking to get people who are wanting to make a change, who are ready to invest in the work, who are looking to show up and make a change, the best place to start is helping them see the change that they might like to make. Because telling people over here, you need to make this change, it's not very receptive. It's none of us, nobody really likes being told you need to make a change in your life. It's just not a very enjoyable place to be. Whereas helping people find that for themselves, to join those dots, is actually far more effective. So if you want to avoid social media altogether, that is perfectly doable. But what we need to understand is, where do the people who don't yet know what the question is go looking for an answer? And it's quite difficult to answer sometimes, but it might not be as far away as you think it is. So, for example, if you are working with people in business, then business networking is a great place to find people who are in business. If you've got a co-working place near you, it's full of businesses. If you are looking for parents, there are parents groups. You know, there are parents meetups. Obviously not saying just go and hang around outside a parents meetup if you're not a parent, but you know what I mean. It's that thing of there are places where you can find these people. There will be other blogs, there'll be other podcasts, there'll be other people, and there'll be other coaches, in fact, talking to those audiences already about something that is complementary but not competitive. So what you add to the conversation is another perspective, and often other coaches quite like talking to other coaches, because as long as you're not both looking for exactly the same client who's at exactly the same stage trying to make exactly the same change, then actually you've got a lot to talk about. You know what I mean? Like, so me and Francis are going on another coach's podcast on Friday to talk about coaching, and it's crazy when you start to think about it. It's like, how is this not conflicting? How is this? But it's not, because we've got different perspectives, we've got different audiences, we're looking for totally different people. So, but we still got a shared interest. So I think that's a good thing to do, is like, if you know there are people who have your audience's attention, then that's a good place to go. So if there's a local gym, for example, if you're looking for people who are looking to make a change in their personal lives, then gyms are a good place to find people who are making changes in their personal lives, because they're showing up and doing the work. You know, sports clubs, rowing clubs, cycling clubs, all these groups are full of people who are actively getting out of their day-to-day and doing something. Those people are more receptive to change than people who are not doing anything in a personal perspective. So I think if we need to think about where some of those people might be, it might not be the most obvious place we first thought. So it's probably worth having a think, or even asking some of your clients, do you go here? Have you heard of this? Do you listen to this podcast? Or better still, what are the three podcasts you listen to most? If you had to answer this question, where would you go looking for the answer? That can be a fun one for a client. You'd be amazed what people say. Oh, there's this person on YouTube, I always go there. Really? I didn't even know that person was on YouTube. You find them, you're like, this is perfect. This is who I need to be talking to. They're all out there. The other thing you can do is you can invite people to forward you other emails that they get, other newsletters they're subscribed to. That's quite an effective one because people, it's easy to do. They find one, forward it, done. That's quite a good one to do. And then you'd be like, oh, I didn't even know that was a thing I could do. Who do we have here? Ah, yes. Lizzie says if there's people if you reach people outside of social media, is your credibility affected if they then can't find you on social media? Is it better to post infrequently? Or just not have an account at all? Well, there's two ways of looking at that. So, for example, I don't have a, what don't I have? I thought I didn't have a TikTok account, but I did make one and post about 3 videos to it. But I should probably rectify that because it's probably old. But the point being, you're right, Leslie. Yes, if they do go looking for you, what do they find? So, for example, if you search BBB on Facebook, you find one post. And that post just says, we don't hang out on Facebook. You'll find us on LinkedIn. Link to the LinkedIn page. It's just a signpost. That's all it needs to be. We're not on TikTok. So if you search for us on TikTok, some other person's probably got the name and is probably posting all sorts of stuff. But who knows? So if you're not going to be on that social network and you think people will look for you there, it's probably worth asking, do I need to be there? And if you don't want to show up there for whatever reason, then make a little video explaining how people can find you. Do a post there just saying, look, I don't hang out here. This isn't where I am, but you can find me here, and just signpost it. It's a really good way of doing it. If you think you might use it in the future, it's definitely worth getting the handles, getting the little @, getting all the names registered. And even if you don't do anything with it, at least you've got that locked in, so it's yours. And just put a post up there saying, come and find me over here. And then if you do decide to activate it down the line, it's fine. There can be a gap between. I think very few people go through to the profile these days. It's not really as like Instagram is changing quite a lot, but because TikTok you can view without needing to log in and blah blah blah. It all changes. But the thing is, this, you know, if you're watching this in a year, it's probably all different. It's the thing with social media. It's the game you've got to play, and you've got to keep playing that game. So, yeah. The other thing, I think making a channel and then signposting is completely fine. I don't think there's a problem with that. I think it's probably better to find something than nothing. Oh, Mark shared in the chat, name checker. That sounds fun. Oh my word. Look at all that list of places to check. Wow. Cash App. Blimey. Venmo. Didn't even thought of that. Yeah. Fascinating. That's a good one. Yeah. So it's worth checking. That will tell you if your name's free or someone else is already on it, but that's a whole different video. So has anybody else got any last questions before we close up, or any suggestions of where their clients are that they didn't think they were when they initially thought about it?
I know where mine are. They're all stressed out at work. The trouble is, they're generally too knackered to engage with anything when they get home, and you know, that's the problem that you face. You know, and in terms of networking, if you don't actually work in a hospital, it's very difficult to network outside that environment. So I've got something in mind, but it's a bit of a long shot. There's a project called NHS Emeritus, which is inviting people to go back to work effectively. But I'm hoping to go back to work in the people helping bit of the health service. So we'll see if that amounts to anything.
Yeah, that's interesting.
If the sign-up process is anything to go by, then it won't. But hey.
Oh no. I mean, I think that's a very good example of a very, like, education, teachers, head teachers, that kind of thing. It's a very difficult market, audience, sorry, to get in front of, because they're busy, they're too busy, and then they're really busy, and they don't have time, for any
they're
of that.
knackered.
But what they really need is that, but they just don't know they want it yet. So I feel the frustration there, and that is a real conundrum of how to get through to them, and there isn't really an easy answer beyond old school flyers, leaflets, posters. You know, is there a bus stop outside the hospital? That kind of stuff. That's when you get into that kind of realm of, that's basically the only way you're going to do it is, you know, flyers under the windscreen wipers, that kind of territory. You know, if it works for a Greek restaurant.
It's very interesting because there's been a lot of stuff about NHS talking, and they talk about all the things that you might usefully use a coach for. I mean, some of them are sort of proper mental health jobs, but others are things you could really usefully use a coach for, and yet coaching isn't part of the offer. And that's really, really frustrating.
Oh, wow.
You know, you've got to want to see a mental health care
That's an own
professional,
goal, isn't it?
you know, and it's, well, I've John Paul's up next to me, and he and I are working on this along with others. Well, Angela's down there as well. I say down, that's just the orientation on my screen, sorry. But yeah, it's very, very difficult.
It is, yeah.
Very, very difficult.
And not all clients are going to be immediately reachable straight away. There is a reason that some people are harder to reach and get to than others. The thing is, you could also say the same thing about people that are very easy to reach, but the change that they're looking to make is a big one. So therefore, it may be, well, I can get in front of 200,000 of these people really quickly, but what I'm asking them to do is big, and therefore the number of people who are willing to make that change and ready to invest is also quite the challenge. So I think essentially the takeaway from this is the process is simple, but it's not easy. It's reassuringly simple steps, but it is not an easy process, because if it was easy, everyone would be doing it. But it doesn't mean it's impossible. It just means that there is often not a shortcut in, but through perseverance and a bit of imagination and a bit of creativity and a bit of thinking laterally, where these people might go to do other things, that might be where the insight lies. So I would say if you're in that position and you're struggling to get in front of those people, then I would definitely just start asking the people you are having conversations with those sorts of questions. What are the podcasts? Where do you go for answers? Do you watch anybody on YouTube? Do you have any newsletters you subscribe to? Just start getting their insight, because they'll tell you. And if you're working not with professionals, but you're working with personal change, then when you felt like that before we started working together, where were you going? What were you doing? What was the point where you thought, I need to get in touch with? Where were you? Describe it. Someone might be like, oh, I was in a coffee shop and I saw a flyer for so-and-so, so I Googled that. Like, oh, okay, coffee shops, now we're talking. Can do something with that. You never know. Could be gyms, could be swimming pools. There's lots of different places for it. But yeah. Anyway, sorry, I've realised we've just gone over the hour. So thank you very much for your for coming along. As I say, the recording will be in the tools and techniques section, so do check that out. It'll be uploaded a bit later on. So yeah, thanks very much.